All right, thank you for standing by. Good morning and welcome to the Deloitte Disability and DC Metro Veteran Transition event. My name is Matt and I will be your conference operator for today's call. At this time, I would like to share a few reminders. This call is 2 hours in length and is being recorded. All attendees will be in a listen-only mode for the duration of the event. Closed captioning is available on today's call by selecting the live transcript option in the bottom ribbon of your Zoom screen. American Sign Language interpreters will also be present throughout the call. If you have technical difficulties during the call, please indicate that using the chat window. With that, I would now like to introduce Ms. Andrea Hall, the immediate past chair of Disability in DC Metro. Please go ahead.
Welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us today. In honor of Veterans Day, we are so pleased to share with you this webinar. It's day 2 in a 2-part series being brought to you this month, which we are very pleased to be co-hosting with our friends at Deloitte. My name is Andrea Hall. I am a Caucasian female in a white shirt with glasses and dark hair, coming to you live from Fort Belvoir, Virginia. I'm honored to have served as the last chair of the Board of Directors at Disability in DC Metro. The DC Metro chapter of Disability In is a nonprofit business-led network. We engage with employers in a dialogue through education and resources with a focus of removing attitudinal and organizational barriers by exchanging best practices to ensure that talent with disabilities is included in today's workforce, our marketplace, and as entrepreneurs. I'd like to express my sincerest thanks to our co-hosts at Deloitte. Their leadership has been on our board for many years as active directors, to include our friend Ryan Walters. Ryan, I'll turn it over to you to get started.
Thanks so much, Andrea, and thanks to everybody who's joined us this morning for this extremely important discussion. We're excited to bring everybody together. And before we start, I did want to just say thank you to a few folks that were so important for making today possible. So first, I want to thank Catherine McCary, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Disability in DC Metro. She has been working with us for months to make today possible. And in line with that, I'd also like to thank Ron Drock, who has been a critical architect for this event and working with us over the past few months. And then 2 individuals from our Deloitte team who have been working in parallel with me on this. And that those folks are Megan LeMay, who is a specialist master at Deloitte, and then Dave Haraska, who is a consultant at Deloitte. Both have put in a lot of time to make this event possible. So thank you both for all your dedication and bringing today to light. So with that, I do want to transition to introduce our Deloitte US military and veteran recruiter, Kevin Werdy, for opening remarks on our call. So Kevin, over to you.
Thank you, Ryan. My name is Kevin Werdy. I'm from Deloitte. I am a Caucasian male dialing in from Jacksonville, Florida today, born and raised out of Chicago for any Midwesterners. It's an absolute honor. I'm privileged to be in front of you and share a few moments with you in some opening remarks. We're going to unpack some things and talk a little bit about beginning with the end in mind. And I think all that will make a little bit more sense once we put up a couple slides here. If we can transition to our first slide. What we wanted to highlight here to kick things off are some key attributes and skills that we're seeing in the marketplace that our veteran talent bring into the corporate setting. And what we are seeing on the slide are 7 key attributes and strengths that our veterans at Deloitte responded to in a survey as some of the key things that veterans are bringing on day 1 in their corporate role. And while there's 7 different strengths here, we want to call out that these are not a holistic result, and there are many other skills that veterans bring to the table. But we just wanted to bring a couple to the forefront as many of you look and go through this transition or the interview process or the beginnings of your corporate sector position, and talk about how these are bringing value and how you can add to your team immediately in your first week of employment. And a couple of these caught my personal attention, and I want to go a little deeper into two of them on the left-hand side that are highlighted in green: interpersonal skills and innovation. Interpersonal skills that we have honed and developed in the military are so strong and so needed in the corporate setting that I cannot harp on this one enough. And I also think it's applicable because many of us on this call are going to be going through the interview process, and those interpersonal skills are going to be what differentiates you from your competition. And when we're talking about interpersonal skills, I think one of the key things that is baked in there is awareness. The awareness to read what is happening inside a conversation, inside a team, inside a locker room, and being able to adapt to that situation. And once we have that awareness as veterans, because we understand we're interacting in dynamic collaborative teams on an hourly basis, we're able to adjust the conversation flow and the communication. And I want to make sure that everyone on this call is aware that how strong their interpersonal skills are, and be proud of those and bring those to the table when you go into the interview room. One key thing that we hear is that veterans inside that interview room are able to identify that the interviewer is ready to move on to the next question. And veterans are really good at sharing the microphone. They're able to sum up key ideas in long projects into concise stories and leverage that awareness and communication skills to making it a meaningful conversation. The other key skill that I want to bring to the forefront is innovation. In the military, we're all aware of an SOP and we go in and there's standard procedures, but we're constantly adapting. We're constantly evolving and improving, and we're thinking on our feet. And that fast thinking and that innovation and being creative on how we can get to a new or different solution on a daily basis, that is something that we have lived and breathed in the military. And again, another highly sought after skill that we want to make sure that as you go into the interview room or you go into your first position, you're aware that you have that creative mindset, that ability to adapt and be innovative. The others are just as important, but those are two key things that have jumped out to me. And again, something that I think you can leverage right out of the gate. We're now going to shift gears a little bit and we're going to jump to the next slide. So those are some great skills for you to lean on, some great examples that you could bring into the interview table as well as into your position. What we wanted to do here is talk a little bit about the formal pipelines that are built in the corporate sector that will allow you to get into a corporate role. These are some common pipelines that corporations are leveraging in their HR talent acquisition teams to bring talent into their organization. We're all very familiar on how we can get onto active duty. We know what the recruiting pipelines are. We know what the platforms are. We know who to call or where to go. Many times when we're making the transition in the corporate sector, we're trying to dissect job applications, Monster, Dice, variety of different things that are being thrown at us. And we don't really know what those formal pipelines are and where things fit. And this is just some kind of fundamental knowledge or information that you can leverage as you begin to interact with recruiters at various organizations. And I'm going to move from left to right on this slide. And what we're showing here is 4 different funnels. At the top of the funnel is the name of the pipeline and the formal talent acquisition titles that corporations use. Inside the funnel, you're seeing some of the assessment and critical success factors that are being taken into consideration. And on the bottom of the funnel of what's coming out, you're looking at some key things around timeline, frequency, attributes that need to be assessed to be successful within that funnel. So let's walk through an example inside each, because it's a wide audience on the phone today. And I think you're going to learn that many of the filters are applicable to you and many of them may not be. So for anybody on the phone that may be thinking or already has enrolled back into school, the campus recruiting bucket is a formal pipeline that organizations use to bring in new talent, whether it's undergrad, professional certifications, advanced degrees. Many organizations have a campus recruiting team inside their HR department. And some of the things that they look at to go bring talent is, what schools do we want to go to that year? Within that university, what degree or major do we need to seek after students in that world to come be successful inside our firm? What year in school are they? Are we going to go after interns? Do we need a full-time hire because we need them to start full-time right away? They're also going to be looking at your grades and your GPA, and SAT and ACT scores can be taken sometimes into consideration, not always. The key things about the campus recruiting process is you can absolutely unpack what companies go to that university, and you can talk to their career resource center. And within that career resource center, you can ask them questions like, what companies are coming here? When do they come onto campus? What events are they hosting? Are they coming to interview freshmen, or do they need seniors? Are they coming to the advanced degree school? Does my major match what that company is seeking? What's the average starting salary that company pays for their students that they're pulling through out of university? All of these great questions can be answered out of the Career Resource Center. Some of you may be weighing 3 or 4 universities that have accepted you, and you may be trying to consider which university to pick to attend. Perhaps the differentiator is what companies will be pulling graduates out of those schools, and maybe your top 2 companies are not at one school, but they're at the other. So getting out in front of this and asking the right questions, again, beginning with the end in mind, can position you for success. So that's a little bit about the campus recruiting process. But we're going to shift gears now over to experienced hire, because we know there's many of you that may be on the phone that are not going back to school or are not enrolled. And you may be saying, I'm looking for a job now. I have the experience. I'm seeking employment. Who do I talk to inside a corporate organization? And the experienced hire bucket is for you. And those that are not going to go back to school, that say, it's time to go, I'm applying, we're going to unpack the experienced hire bucket. Within the experienced hire bucket, right, they're seeking exactly what's in the title, the exact experience, the exact technical experience, operational experience, sometimes professional certifications. You may see in the job descriptions, we're looking for 2+ years of XYZ or 5+ years of this. Sometimes they also put in there a minimum baseline of education. You must have already completed your bachelor's or must have already completed an advanced degree. The experienced hire roles are very, very niche. They're very, very specific. For many of us, including myself, when I was getting out of the Navy in 2009, I was applying to experienced hire roles, and I was being rejected to, if not all of them, before I even minimized the window. Being on this side of the HR curtain and now understanding what is happening behind the application machine, I've come to realize that my experience was not 100% matching to what that job description needed or required. And I was 80 or 90 or 95% there. However, my competition had the exact years or even then some. So for any of you that are applying to roles and you may be getting rejected instantaneously or within short notice, it could be that other candidates have a little bit more experience or skill sets that are directly aligned to that corporate role because they've been in the corporate setting for 5 or 10 years. And many of the experiences we pick up in the military from a technical alignment perspective does not match what the experience bucket has. And that's going to lead me to the third bucket, the call to action that corporate America has had. And I'm excited to announce that over the last 10 years, corporations across the country have realized that they want to bring more military and veteran talent into their organization but they're not that, but the campus recruiting bucket nor the experienced hire bucket is allowing them to pull through enough volume to their liking, and they want more military talent. And I'm going to go deeper into this veteran recruiting pipeline. The beauty of the veteran recruiting pipeline is there's another boot camp for us. Just like when we were a civilian and we needed training to pivot and upskill us to get us successful to be on active duty, corporations are designing boot camps or training for you to be successful inside their organization. And training and upskilling is the key word for veteran recruiting. It's taking an individual that is a utility infielder or best athlete that is 80 to 90% there from an experienced hire job description standpoint, and it is shoring up and bridging that last 15 to 20% through the use of a boot camp, if you will. Many organizations are doing this across a variety of different career occupations, whether it's upskilling you into supply chain or logistics or finance, or so many new technologies that are growing on a daily basis. Some key things like Workday, ServiceNow, Oracle, Salesforce, SuccessFactors, just to name a few. Companies can upskill you or train you across a variety of different operations, and then they can tap back into those 7 key attributes that we had on the previous slide. We know that you outpace your civilian counterparts on all of those different things that were there: collaboration, teamwork, leadership, planning, project management, managing budget, managing personnel, collaborating in a team to innovate and develop new solutions. All of those things that you previously seen, we're so strong at as a veteran community. And the veteran recruiting pipeline allows you then some to add in a new component, a new skill. And corporations can train you as in little of 3 weeks to as long as 11 to 12 weeks, and sometimes have designed 1 year to 2 year rotational programs. Before I transition to the last bucket, I'm going to summarize the 3 funnels. We have campus recruiting, and if you're a student, please interact with your career resource center at that university. We have experienced hire for folks that have the exact skill sets that the military have trained them in. Cyber, logistics, administrative duties, things that you're ready to go and it's going to be an easy day, and you can apply for that exact role if you're passionate about continuing your career down that path. And thirdly, the last bucket, that is that utility infielder bucket that allows you to tap into all of those technical and soft skills that the military has trained you in and provide additional training and upskilling that an organization is going to provide you. The last bucket, while it's not a formal recruiting pipeline, we did want to bring it front and center, and that is the referral machine, we call it. And why I call it the machine is because as organizations take a step back and they look at their recruiting numbers on an annual basis, they constantly look to say, what was the source? Where did they come from? In many organizations, the number one hiring source for them is employee referrals. An employee referral is the number one source continuously for Deloitte and many other organizations as where the source of talent comes from. Why we wanted to bring referrals front and center is for a few benefits that it adds to the process. For those of you in the transition that are looking for a new career, whether it's from military to corporate or corporate to corporate, we highly encourage you to interact with employees that are at that organization that you are targeting. It does a few things. Through those informal conversations, you begin to learn more about the culture, more about their acronyms, more about their interview process, more about their short-term and long-term career opportunities. You also begin to establish credibility. You have people inside the organization that become your boardroom that is pounding the table for you to get hired. When you get to the interview table, you'll also learn that you're almost speaking the language of the future peers because of so many informal conversations and coffee chats that you had through that referral and through those informal networking opportunities. LinkedIn, absolutely probably the #1 driver for you to identify employees, not only employees, but veterans or veteran allies that work inside that organization that will always answer the call. Every time I'm on a group setting, it's great to hear that a veteran says, I have never not answered a LinkedIn message to help somebody. So that's all I have. I apologize. I looked at the clock. I think I went a minute or two over. We're going to shift gears, and I'm very excited to introduce our keynote speaker, Margarita Devlin from the Department of Labor. And Margarita is going to take you through a series of different programs and policies that her team has in place to support you in this transition. Margarita, do you want to take it from here?
Good morning. Thank you, Kevin. I'm happy to take it from here. My name is Margarita Devlin. I'm with the Department of Labor, Veterans Employment Training Service. I'm Caucasian female wearing a navy blue suit with a white blouse. Happy to be here to talk to you all about the programs that we have. I have been with the Veterans Employment and Training Service for about 4 months, so I'm pretty new here after 26 years with the Department of Veterans Affairs. But I'm really excited to talk to you all about the programs that we have to support employment and training for veterans, transitioning service members, and military spouses. It's been humbling in these last few months to be a part of this extended team with you as we continue to perform this meaningful work to enhance employment success for those we serve. Last year, over 2,800 staff of vets, so federal employees and contractors and grantee staff served over 370,000 transitioning service members, veterans, and military spouses across all agency programs. Obviously, the past year has been particularly hard due to the pandemic, and it certainly appears that the future of work will be much different than what we've experienced before COVID, especially in terms of virtual work and new career occupations. If we could go to the next slide, please. So I'll cover our mission, vision, and priorities, a little bit about our transition assistance program, some focused programs on disabled veterans, and a little bit about our new disabled veteran program, an update there, and also talk to you just a little bit about our Vets Medallion Award program. Next slide. So what do we do in VETS? And VETS is the acronym we use for our program. We call it the 4 Ps. So we prepare America's veterans and transitioning service members and military spouses for meaningful careers. We provide them with employment resources and expertise. We protect their employment rights under things like the USERRA, which is the Uniform Service Employment and Reemployment Rights Act, and also veterans preference in hiring. We also promote their employment opportunities to employers. Next slide, please. So we have our vision in VETS is that we enable all veterans, transitioning service members, and military spouses to achieve their full potential in the workplace. And our priorities, which have evolved just a little bit in the last year, get the military to civilian transition right? That's the preemptive service we can provide to get veterans off on the right foot after they leave the military. Leveraging the right strategic partnerships, so through partners such as yourselves to maximize employment outcomes for veterans. And then thirdly, advancing equity and inclusion in our underserved veteran communities. And we can go to the next slide. When you look at the employment situation of veterans and non-veterans, what you see really historically is that veterans' unemployment rate is lower than their non-veteran counterparts. So veterans really are faring better than their non-veteran counterparts pretty consistently, even through the COVID-19 pandemic. So the good news for veterans and non-veterans alike is that unemployment rates have continued their steady decline since the COVID peak of nearly 12% in April 2020. And October's veteran unemployment rate was 4.2%. compared to 4.6% for non-veterans. The veteran rate is held steady the last 3 months with just a slight uptick from 3.8% in August to October's 4.2% rate. So I am glad to see that we're getting to the pre-COVID unemployment rates, although we do still have some work ahead of us to get back to the 3.1% low that we hit in 2019. What you don't see on this slide, though, is that the pandemic did exacerbate existing economic inequalities. For example, the average African American veteran unemployment rate in 2020 was 7.5%, while the average unemployment rate for white veterans in 2020 was 6.1%. So we still have some things to address in that space with respect to equity and inclusion. Well, let me start by talking about what we do to prepare our veterans while they're still serving in the military. If we can go to the next slide. What I'm showing you here is sort of the paradigm for the standardized transition assistance program. This is a program that is managed by the Department of Defense, but includes partners such as the Department of Labor Vets, our office, and the Department of Veterans Affairs, and also Small Business Administration, Department of Education, Office of Personnel Management. So it is a multi-agency effort. What you see here is that Department of Defense has 1 day of curriculum that they offer. VA has their day where they talk about VA benefits and healthcare. And then Department of Labor and Small Business Administration combined offer a track that a service member chooses. So think about this as when you go to college and you have your mandatory core courses, and then you have mandatory credit hours that you have to do as well with electives. And so you don't have to do all of the electives that are offered, but you have to choose a certain number to meet your college credit hour requirement. The Transition Assistance Program is similar. There are 3 days that are mandatory that are the same for every transitioning service member. Those are the single Department of Defense day, the single Department of Veterans Affairs day, and then the single Department of Labor Employment day. Once those 3 days are completed, the remaining 2 days of that 5-day period is where the service member chooses a track. And each of those track choices, they encompass 2 days each. So they can choose the track for vocational training, which is more of like the technical type of training. They can choose the accessing higher education track if they're planning on going to college, or they can choose the employment workshop, which is sort of a continuation of the mandatory initial course, or they can choose the entrepreneurship track, which is hosted by the Small Business Administration. So as you can see, it's a pretty comprehensive program. And most recently, we changed the Department of Labor program, and the whole 5-day track was changed based on the 2019 National Defense Authorization Act, or NDAA, which is what created the new structure that has the 3 days of mandatory curriculum, and then the 2 days that are chosen based on the service members' unique interests and desires. And so, and as you can see, we have over 200 locations worldwide, and many workshops that are offered by our organization. If we go to the next slide, I want to talk to you about some other initiatives that we've started to really help kind of layer on additional services and support. So first, I'll talk about the Employment Navigator and Partnership Pilot. This is really new. We kicked it off last April at select installations worldwide. These employment navigators are professionals who are on site at these military installations, and they provide one-on-one assistance to help transitioning service members answer that big question: what are you going to do next? What am I going to do after military service? What career options should I be thinking about? That one-on-one engagement will then lead the navigator to help that service member connect to partners, and we've formalized 9 partners at this time that provide a whole host of services, including wraparound services, mentoring, job placement, connection to community resources. There's a lot of resources that each of these partners can provide, and the navigator will help that service member not have to figure out which partner to go to. They will connect them to the appropriate partners based on their unique situation, interests, and needs. We're very excited to do this. Although I mentioned we have 9 partners at this point, we have recently opened up the portal to allow other organizations who are interested in partnering with us to help transitioning service members receive the services that they need. So that opened up and is on our website. So in the first few months of this pilot, employment navigators have assisted about just under 2,000 transitioning service members and 140 military spouses. So that's pretty exciting. And as we go through this, we're collecting data from service members to gauge their experiences, how satisfied they are with this program, and we will improve from there. Also, I wanted to mention we have a program for military spouses. This is also fairly new. And I'll start with the acronym because it's kind of cool. The acronym is TEAMS, T-E-A-M-S. And TEAMS stands for Transition Employment Assistance for Military Spouses. There are 9 courses. They are modular so that the military spouse can choose which parts they want to participate in. It is virtual, which means it accommodates their work schedules, and they don't have to come on the military base to participate in this program. This is also fairly new, and we're excited to start getting feedback from military spouses on what they think of the program. Next slide, please. So some really great initiatives that we're excited about and that we hope will really help transitioning service members navigate that transition. But one thing I like to talk about when we talk about TAP, there are probably a lot of people in the audience right now who are veterans who transitioned out 10 years ago, 15 years ago. And so you might be thinking, my TAP experience doesn't sound anything like what Ms. Devlin is describing. Well, that's probably true. When you look at the timeline for TAP, which is the acronym for Transition Assistance Program, it really started officially in 1991, but really it didn't morph into the structure that it has today, or anywhere near the structure we have today, until 2011. 2011, the law went into place that said it is now mandatory for all transitioning service members to participate in the Transition Assistance Program. Now, the law went into effect in 2011, but it did take the different government agencies a few years to fully implement. So between 2011 and about 2013 is really when each government agency that had responsibility was working on developing the pieces that they owned to put this whole thing all together. So around 2013, 2014, if you transitioned in around that time frame, you probably went through a TAP program that's similar to what we had today. And then, as I mentioned earlier, in 2019 and 2020, it evolved again so that instead of being the same 5-day program for all service members, it was the same 3 days with 2 days that the service member got to choose to make it more unique to them. And then, of course, as I mentioned, we had now the transition program for military spouses. And you'll see on this timeline a 2022 initiative that hasn't been implemented yet, but we are working on implementing. And we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. And we'll talk about, okay, here we go. And I think this will be really interesting based on this topic that we're talking about today of individuals with disabilities. We are working on a Wounded Warrior and Caregiver Employment Workshop. So this will be a workshop with curriculum that's similar to what any service member would go through for their Department of Labor 1-day mandatory course, but with some tweaks to really focus on veteran service members who will be veterans who have injuries or illness or disabilities that will make their circumstances slightly different, and also potentially for their caregivers to participate as well. So we're doing things like adding advocacy, self-advocacy, navigating things like accommodations in the workplace. And we developed this in coordination with Department of Labor's Office of Disability Employment Policy. We collaborated with veteran service organizations and other individuals to make sure that we really could sort of narrow in on areas of interest to persons with disabilities to make sure that their unique needs are addressed. We held listening sessions with these organizations and with veterans. We looked at research reports and studies and conducted interviews with recently separated wounded veterans. This will be a blended or hybrid delivery model. which will have some self-paced e-learning modules and also a new employment rights and self-advocacy module. And there will be corresponding instructor-led and virtual discussion and activity sessions. So we're very excited about this new program. We will be pilot testing this in the springtime, and then we will deploy from there. Next slide, please. So the other one that was in the 22 timeline is the off-base transition training pilot. So Congress put into law that Department of Labor vets would implement an off-base transition assistance training program. Why would we do this? Well, a couple of reasons. The thinking behind this is, first of all, service members are, we talk about the fire hose effect, right? When they're going through transition, they've got everything coming at them at once. It's life-changing. They're picking their place where they're going to live, what they're going to do for their career, what VA benefits they need to sign up for. They've got a lot going on. If they've got a spouse and children, they're also navigating spouse employment. They're also navigating new schools potentially. With everything going on, a lot of times we hear that they weren't able to fully absorb everything that was coming at them during the transition period. So what this does is it helps us to reinforce the learning and the support, especially in that 1 year after separation. But also we hear from a lot of veterans who have been out of the military for a long time. Hey, that TAP program wasn't around when I got out. Wouldn't it be great if I could go through TAP? Well, now they will be able to. So we're trying to be responsive to the needs of veterans and spouses who are out there in communities, who are not on a military installation, and who could use that extra support. Now, when we think about this, we think, okay, so we're going to use similar curriculum to what transitioning service members are participating in their program, but we're tweaking it a bit because we know that veterans who are already out of the military may not need the entire curriculum. They might just need pieces of it. Maybe they just want to know, how do I create a LinkedIn account? Maybe they just need help with a resume, or maybe they've got the really great resume and a LinkedIn account and they just need some help navigating the employment landscape. How do I actually get a job? So we are working with 5 states to pilot this program. Those 5 states are California, Massachusetts, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Texas. And in those 5 states, we're in the process of working with partners such as the state departments of Veterans Affairs, the National Association of Workforce Agencies, and other partners to identify classroom locations in communities in those 5 states where we have high veteran population so that we can start offering these classes in person. And we will also be supplementing these classes with a virtual option as well. So we're very excited about that, which will be implemented also in the springtime. Next slide, please. So another resource I like to make sure everybody is aware of, we fund the state workforce agencies to operate almost 2,400 American job centers across the country. They're sometimes called something different, but they're essentially a career one-stop. And you see a link to the website on this slide where you can identify the location in your community if you need help or if you know a veteran who needs help with employment. So these are career training and job search locations. These are staffed with staff that we fund that will help veterans navigate all of those needs. They get priority of service in all DOL funded workforce system programs. We also have on this website, it serves job seekers, it serves businesses seeking to hire veterans, students, and career advisors, also with free online tools, information, and resources. And of course, we have specific services for veterans and specifically for persons with disabilities. On that website, you can type in a zip code, city, or state, and you'll find the American Job Center near you. In those job centers, we fund 2 specific positions, really kind of 3 because one's a hybrid. The first one is the Disabled Veterans Outreach Program Representative, and those individuals provide intensive services and job placement to veterans with significant barriers. We also fund about 500 veteran employment resource individuals who conduct the outreach to employers and set up accounts with employers who are seeking to hire veterans. And then there are a few states that have hybrid staff who are really working both functions. the Disabled Veteran Outreach Program function, and the Employment Resource function. But as you can see on the map, we're all over the country. So for any veteran in any community, we're there for them. Next slide. So just to kind of recap the services that we provide to service members as they're transitioning, you can see on the slide we have the employment workshops that I talked about, the Wounded, Ill, and Injured Employment Workshop, which is now called the Wounded Warrior and Caregiver Employment Workshop, which will be implemented soon. And then you see that also there's the support to the capstone. So what is the capstone? In that week of transition services that are provided up to a year before separation, those culminate before the service member leaves the military in what we call a capstone event. And this is where the service member meets with the commander or with a transition representative in the military service that verifies that that service member is truly ready for transition, that they meet career readiness standards. And that means they have a home that they're going to be going to, they have employment, or they're enrolled in college full-time, or they're starting a business, but they're on the right track. And during that capstone event, if there are risks identified, in particular for us, if there's a risk identified with employment, then that service member will be referred to us for intensive services so that we can help make sure that they get into a job as soon as possible after separation. And of course, our American Job Centers that I just described are key resources in that space. Next slide, please. Now, after separation from the military, I talked about the off-base transition training pilot we're going to be implemented. I talked about the American Job Centers. We also collaborate with the Department of Veterans Affairs because, of course, VA has many resources to help fund education options for transitioning service members. That includes the GI Bill, the post 9/11 GI Bill, which a service member can use for college or for vocational training or even for apprenticeship. And then there's also the Veterans Technology Training Program, which is sort of a subset of the GI Bill, and the Rapid Retraining Assistance Program, which is a temporary program to help mitigate the effects of the pandemic and includes additional eligibility categories for other veterans. So we collaborate closely with VA because we really sort of have complementary services that veterans should be aware of so that they can navigate the employment space effectively. And of course, the vocational, I keep getting stuck. They changed their name. The Veteran Readiness and Employment Program, which used to be called the Vocational Rehabilitation and Employment Program. By the way, the reason they changed their name is from veteran feedback. Veterans kept saying they weren't hearing about the program in TAP, and what really happened was the name of the program and the content wasn't resonating for them. So Veteran Readiness and Employment is essentially a vocational rehabilitation program for veterans with disabilities, and we collaborate very closely with VA on the delivery of services through that program. Next slide. In Department of Labor, we created an Office of Research and Policy so that we could really focus on our learning agenda to determine what we might want to work on in terms of legislative, employment, or other workforce development issues. So we look at legislation and legislative trends that affect our service delivery systems, and we look at areas where we might need to either create new initiatives or make improvements. We have a Women Veterans Program and a Disabled Veterans Program. And I'll go ahead and go into the Disabled Veterans Program because I know that's probably of most interest here. So we'll go ahead and go to the next slide. So this is a program that was implemented in July of 2021, and it was created, excuse me, to evaluate the unemployment and labor force participation rate of veterans with both service-connected and non-service-connected disabilities. So it includes, so we're doing active research around challenges related to veterans' employment, and more specifically, those with significant barriers to employment and with disabilities. Our research analyst is focusing on building relationships across the veteran service organizations to stay abreast of challenges veterans with disabilities face as they transition into and throughout the workforce community. In October 2021, when we look at the 12-month rolling average for the unemployment rates by veteran and disability status using the current population survey tables, what we see is that the veterans' unemployment rate for persons with a disability was 4.8%, while the veterans' unemployment rate for persons with no disability was 3.8%. So you can see there's a 1% difference between veterans with and without disabilities. When you look at non-veterans, the unemployment rate for persons with a disability was 9.5%, while the non-veteran unemployment rate for persons with no disability was 4.0%. So you see a much bigger gap between non-veterans with disabilities versus non-disabilities. In the veteran space, the gap is much narrower. So, and that really goes to show that we have comprehensive services to help our veterans with disabilities navigate the employment space. Right now, we have 2 exploratory research topics we are currently concentrating on, including identifying and understanding the most common significant barriers to employment for veterans with disabilities, and also reviewing labor force participation rate for veterans with disabilities. And we have Micah Foster's contact information on there. He is our Disabled Veteran Program representative. Next slide, and on my last slide, I just want to give a shout out to the employers that received the Hire Vets Medallion Program Award. It is the only federal award that recognizes employers who hire, retain, and support veterans. Last week, we recognized 849 Hire Vets Medallion Award recipients. So thanks to our partners and stakeholders who helped us get the word out about this program. We increased the recipients from last year by 26%, and our goal next year is 1,000 awardees. And I know with continued advocacy and support, we will reach that milestone. The Hire Vets Medallion application period opens up again on January 31st. That is what I had to share with you. That was my last slide. And I don't know if we're opening it up for questions, but I hope this information was helpful to you all.
Thank you, Ms. Devlin. With that, we will now move into the panel portion of our event. I would now like to introduce Mr. Ryan Walters, a senior consultant in Deloitte's Government and Public Services practice, who will be moderating today's panel. Please go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Matt. And Ms. Devlin, thank you for sharing all of those resources. That was incredible to understand kind of the current snapshot of the Department of Labor and Vets and kind of that forward-looking trajectory of some of the programs. So thank you for that incredible view into all the resources available. So at this time, I do want to, pivot into our panel. As a reminder, Ryan Walters, as Matt said, a senior consultant under our Deloitte's Government and Public Services practice. I'm a white male, 29 years old, brown hair, and I've got a tan dress shirt on today. At this time, I'd like to just start with introductions on, some of our panelists. So I'd like to just go through the folks that we have on the line today and have each share background on themselves before we start to dive into a few questions. So first, I'd like to turn it over to Juan Garcia to share his background.
Hey, glad to, Ryan, and thanks for coordinating what's been a great event so far. Appreciate it. Hey, Juan Garcia, retired naval aviator, as my kids say, nasal radiator. Served in the Obama administration as the Assistant Secretary of the Navy. Did my cooling off period at Amazon as the global leader for associate development for a couple of years, and I've been at Deloitte now for 3 years. And I have the privilege of leading Deloitte's veteran and military affiliated community. Glad to be with you today.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Juan. Ms. Langley.
Hi, thank you, Ryan. Good morning, everybody. My name is Pam Langley. I am a white Caucasian female with glasses and a white jacket over a pinstripe blouse. I'm happy to be here. A little background on me. I was in the military. I served in active duty Navy, the Army National Guard, and the Army Reserve for a total of over 33 years in the military. I enjoyed it immensely, and I am proud to be a member of the VETS team. My primary responsibilities as the TAP operations lead are the curriculum development responsibilities. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Pam. And lastly, Kevin Rash. So Kevin, turning it over to you.
Thanks, Ryan. And I'm Kevin Rash. I am also a Caucasian male. I have red, slightly graying hair, I guess, at this point. I am wearing a green sweater. Like Juan, I am a retired naval aviator. I retired about 10 years ago, and I've been with Wounded Warrior Project for a little over 7, currently working with our Warriors to Work program, which is one of our 15 different programs that focuses on helping warriors and their family members find gainful employment. And I'm really excited to be here and to share with you all.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for those overviews. As folks on the line can see, we've got a phenomenal group together for this panel today. So we've got a few questions that we want to run through with everybody. And, first off, we want to start with a question for all of our panelists today. And, the question is, what do you see as some of the challenges for veterans transitioning into the civilian sector? So Juan, I'll start with you, and we can go in the order that we did introductions.
Glad to. And also, Ryan, I want to congratulate you on putting together this Navy panel of Navy personnel. We heard from Kevin earlier. It's we're calling it Navy Day here. Hey, I'll get to a mechanical piece real quick, but a kind of personal dynamic phenomenon I hear from a lot of interviewers is this. A lot of transitioning vets are, for however long they've spent in uniform, have been kind of conditioned to be a link in the chain, right? To not stand out, right? You're part of a team. That's the core, whether it's on an aircraft carrier or wherever it is. Your last couple of years have meant that no one should. It doesn't work unless every link in the chain is operating and you don't stand out and try to separate yourself from the other links in the chain. This is one moment where you have to do so, and it goes against your instinct, but you've got to find a way to gracefully and comfortably convey the full impact of your experience and the responsibilities you've been entrusted with, and the training you've undergone, and the value you can bring to someone's corporation company. I know for a lot of vets that is that goes against their instinct, and it's hard to do, but you got to take that step across the psychological chasm to convey exactly what you'll bring to them. Let me pass it over to Pam.
Thank you, Juan. And that was an excellent answer. What I would add to that is that what we hear in our in working with our veterans is that they struggle to frame their unique talents. As you indicated, Ron, it's stepping out. It's like, showing that they do have a uniqueness and they have that unique experience that isn't comparable in most of their peers who have been in the workforce rather than going into the military. So they have those unique abilities and those technical skill sets that employers are looking for, but they struggle to identify how to show that. So through our different programs that Margarita went through very explicitly, we kind of infuse those training options into our TAP curriculum. And that includes the curriculum for our military spouses. They also have unique skill sets because of where they've been throughout the United States and the world, and different things that they've done, having that connection to the military. So I think those would be the really unique things that we have to train transitioning service members, spouses, and even veterans in how to identify those and pull those out and show those during an interview. Thank you.
I can follow up on that as well. One of the biggest challenges that we see with a lot of the transitioning service members is a transition in structure. When you're in the military, you're in a very structured environment. You know what your title is, your pay is pretty much non-negotiable. For your career path, it's pretty much mapped out for you. You meet with a detailer every 3 years or so, and you're given one of 3 options, pick one and move forward. when you hit that endpoint, those options are limitless. And I think a lot of the analysis by paralysis or paralysis by analysis comes up at that point where you see so many different opportunities out there and you say, I can do anything, just give me the chance. And that's not what a recruiter wants to hear. You have to really try and get some better focus as to what you want to do. And that's one of the biggest challenges we see is service members not knowing what they want to be when they grow up, and really not being able to understand what all is out there. So working with others, but using your network and some of the other things that we'll be talking about are some great tools to help overcome some of those challenges.
Hey, Ryan, can I put a very quick punctuation point on this? As many of you know, and have been involved in, Deloitte does these recurring employment boot camps with Kevin and Wounded Warrior project as well. And not too far back, this was the case in point of what all three of us, I think, were getting at. We had a transitioning Army vet who, when I asked her what her MOS was, what her military occupational specialty was, she explained to me that she was a logistician, or whatever the term the Army uses for logisticians. And she said, yeah, I'm basically like a Walmart shelf stocker. I said, no, that's not what you are. The Army and the nation invested in that training and that MOS to make you a logistical expert. As the recently passed Colin Powell famously said, amateurs talk strategy, professionals talk logistics, right? And in a world where that kind of supply chain background is invaluable and is a really hot commodity, to undersell yourself and convey to an interviewer that, yeah, I'm the equivalent of a Walmart a shelf stocker, is exactly what we got to get past. Thanks.
So that's a great point that you both brought up there. And I want to pull the thread a little bit on that, right? So when we're talking about those skills, those translatable skills that are accumulated through a military career, how would you advise that veterans think about that application of those transferable skills to more of that strategic mindset going into the civilian sector? So this is kind of for everybody as well. But Kevin, I'll start with you.
Yeah, translating those skills is huge. And as Juan was saying, you don't want to sell yourself short. And we use one of the examples, like I was an infantryman, all I'm qualified for is law enforcement or security. And that's by far the farthest away from the truth. There's tons of military skills translators that are out there. If you Google military skills translator, they actually have a pretty good one where you plug in your MOS and experience. It'll kind of tell you some different career paths or different opportunities, but those are all generic. You really have to get down to you as an individual and what do you want to do, and what are you trained to do, and leverage some of those softer skills. Use your network and figure out like, hey, talk to people who've been there, gone before you, and see what kind of skill set they look for, and really take that to the next level and understand, like, you bring so much more to the table than just a trigger puller or there's some skill sets that are easily translatable. A lot of the IT skill sets, a lot of the if you're going to go into work as a former aviator in the aviation industry as a pilot or as a mechanic or something like that, some of those are easy plug and play. And when you go back to what Kevin's experienced, the funnels for the different recruiters, you can find yourself maybe in a better pool of applicants when you're looking at that. But I think like learning what your skills, what you bring to the table, and doing an introspective look as to what you want to do and not just what you're qualified to do is huge. And again, you don't need to do it alone. There are people that will help walk you through that process who have already been through that process themselves.
Fantastic. Anything else to add from our other panelists?
Go ahead, Pam.
Okay, thank you, Juan. Well, DO, we use through our programs, through our instruction, we recommend ONET Military Skills Translator. It's a very detailed translator, but you can put your MOS right into that translator and it will come up with positions that are similar to what you did in the military, and also identify the types of activities that are a part of that job. So that's one of the ones that we use. Of course, in our Employment Navigator and Partnership Pilot, of course, all of our partners have different military skills translators that they use. But what we hear in our transition workshops with transitioning service members is they really don't know how to translate. They know what they did and they know how to explain it in military terminology, but it's getting that, what is it comparable to in civilian terminology? And so we go through, some different training scenarios where we take an MOS and then we translate it generally into civilian terms. And so then we of course walk transitioning service members through the different resources they might be able to use to assist with that translation. So thank you.
Hey, Ryan, the only thing I might add to these two great responses is I think there's tentacles from this question to the previous one. And it goes like this. What we see is a lot of transitioning vets, whether it's in a LinkedIn scenario or an employee reception scenario, or even the actual interview scenario, is they see a senior player. And some people are thrown here at Deloitte. We go by on a first name basis from CEO all the way down. But their instinct is to go the other way. I get it. There was a time in my life when I saw the admiral coming down the passageway. I knew nothing good could come from that interaction. I'd go the other way too. But you've got to get past that. And of course, you're going to be appropriately respectful and defer to experience and all those pieces. But those folks want to hear about the substance of that MOS or that rate or that experience you've had. And you don't have to gloss over it. You don't have to worry that they won't understand. Walk them through it, explain it to them. That's what's going to help them understand the benefit and the experience and the training that's going to add to their company's objective or mission.
Hey, and if I could really just put a quick point in there, I wanted to mention, we've seen some real creativity with some employers who are actually doing the reverse, and they're looking for a civilian to military skills translation for their recruiting efforts. So they'll look and see, specific example, we had a financial services industry or company that was looking to hire analysts to track their anti-money laundering operations, and they were looking for people with cryptology or intel backgrounds. So when you see the civilian sector actually recognizing the value and figuring out how to figure it out on their side, that's real positive and hopeful for all of us.
Fantastic. And Kevin, I want to continue on that and kind of, ask when we're looking at employers and the hiring process, right, around that, what do you think are maybe some improvements or things that employers should always make sure that they're doing to help veterans that are transitioning?
One of the things that we've really been focusing on is mentorship, and peer-to-peer mentoring goes a long way. And when you see companies that have an established employee resource group or affinity groups or peer mentoring groups that are focused on veterans, that really sets a welcoming environment for a veteran to come on board, to understand like, hey, I was here a few months ago in your shoes and look where I am now. So leveraging that mentorship aspect of it is really, we're seeing a lot of companies that either are doing it organically or that they're trying to develop programs because they've seen successes in other organizations that you guys are doing great at hiring veterans. How can we do that? Within the Warriors to Work program, we talk to employers, and honestly, one of my responsibilities with my role is business development and working with employers who want to hire veterans. And honestly, it's the easiest business development job I've ever had. Not that I've had a lot of them, but there are so many employers that reach out to us and want to hire veterans. And when we have such a good product to sell, I can just talk about all the good things they bring to the table.
And Pam, I'm curious to get your perspective too from the Department of Labor and kind of what you're seeing as those best practices for employers.
Oh, well, you know what? The best practice that I can point out is our Hire Vets Medallion Award winners. I mean, let's face it, they show that they have programs that reach out to veterans, as Kevin and Juan have both identified. They have different affinity groups for veterans within their organizations. They offer up mentors to work with transitioning service members. And that's really, those employers show that they recognize the skills, the proven leadership, and the integrity that a veteran brings to the table already. And so they are capitalizing on those things. And we direct our transitioning service members to look at the Higher Vets Medallion winners and reach out to those organizations through their LinkedIn accounts, which we also provide instruction on, and through, other avenues, even just an informational interview with a company can get them further down the track. And, it's that networking, that seems to be kind of a thread that's going through everything we said. There's a lot to be said just for reaching out and in your network, and then having that network reach out through theirs. So that's really what I would say is our Higher Vets Medallion winners. We can't thank them enough.
Hey, Ryan, great responses from Pam and Kevin. The piece I might add is, look, if you're in a position as Deloitte is to have a dedicated recruiter like Kevin, who you heard from earlier, who's a Naval Academy grad and served, and his right-hand person is Brendan O'Boyle's a Marine. Those guys speak the language. They know what the acronyms mean. They get it. That's a great first start. Then comes the retention piece, which I think you alluded to in your question as well. What I find at a Deloitte is transitioning vets are coming from what might be the most defined, bold point, direct chain of command in the world, right? When you're in uniform, you know who writes your fit rep, and you know everybody you're responsible for, right? You get to a Deloitte or a lot of other places in the corporate world, and you get this kind of complex, matrixed, cross-fixed organization that makes for, it could be a challenging adjustment to find your way. So programs like we have, and I know many others have as well, a 12-month journey, we call it. We're paired up with a vet mentor to help navigate that piece, making sure they're folded into our VMA, Veterans and Military Affiliated Group, right away, so they get a jump start on building out their network across across the firm. They know immediately they can reach out to a couple hundred folks who have gone through the same process, are invaluable in getting through that that first 12 months till you really feel comfortable, and then you're off and running.
Fantastic. And Juan, I want to dive a little bit deeper, and in terms of organizations that we partner with to help transitioning veterans or just veterans in general, can you speak to a little bit of that background?
Yeah, glad to. Ryan, I know you've been involved with our recurring employment boot camps. Of course, for the last year and a half, we call them virtual employment boot camps. But Kevin's organization, WWP Wounded Warrior Project, feeds us candidates. The Air Force equivalent, I think they call theirs AW2, does the same as well. Matter of fact, we just did a series of Veterans Day employment boot camps across the country, I think six live and some others virtual as well. And it's a 2-day process. All the things you're going to need, right? It's resume grooming, it's the elevator pitch, it's interview practice. They hear from recruiting and corporate leaders who give their best insights into the interview process and what's worked and what hasn't. And look, maybe those folks land with Deloitte or one of the other participating entities. Maybe they don't, but they walk away. The surveys at least suggest they walk away feeling wildly more prepared for what's coming. We heard earlier from our speaker, from Margarita, about just how far the TAP process has evolved. So since maybe, Kevin, we're probably the same vintage, right? It used to be 1 day off the flight schedule, and it's E1 to O10, and right. And it's become so much more sophisticated. I like to think what Deloitte and other firms are doing is the next layer on top of that process to build that bridge for transitioners.
And if I could just piggyback on that, those employment boot camps that we work with Deloitte on are incredible. We've got about a 56% placement rate coming out of there with our warriors that go through it, which is great. And that's a rolling. So they're continuing to get placed out of it. It's really complementary to some of the services we provide. We talk to them about the importance of having a resume and getting your elevator pitch and how to sell yourself and everything. But when it's validated by an industry leader like Deloitte, it sounds so much better. When we work with other employers, we can talk to her blue in the face, and it's kind of a mom and dad relationship. We can say it all we want, but when they hear it from somebody outside, it really resonates. And really the information they're getting and the experience they're getting, the comfort, the building themselves up and realizing that they're not alone in this transition. there's other people that are going through the same exact issues that they are with, whether it's the stress and anxiety of not having a job and the big changes coming up and everything like that. We can work with them, and we can leverage our relationships with partnerships like Deloitte, and within Wounded Warrior Project, we have other programs. We have 15 different programs, and it's been said before that we could spin them off into 15 different nonprofits, but we have the synergy of all the programs working together. So with our mental health program, we recognize the stressors associated with not having a job. There's stressors associated with having a job. And sometimes it just helps to talk to somebody about that. Hey, I'm going through this. And you get that positive reinforcement that you're not alone, and that there are people that are willing and really want to help you get through that process. One of the biggest, going back to the challenges, is thinking you can do it alone, because I know when I got out of the Navy, I made up my resume. I thought it looked great, and I would send it out to everybody, and nobody's answering until somebody looked at it. It's like, well, you got to tailor it to the job that you're applying for. Nobody cares all the good things you did. How is it going to affect them moving forward? So I think the collaborative experiences with working with industry leaders and other VSOs and other organizations that are out there helping with training, and maybe it's a different certification or level of education that you might need to get to that next level. Understanding there's so many resources out there to tap into.
So I'm curious on that too. Broadly for this group, I'm wondering, those stressors, right? When we're talking about those stressors, what kind of stressors are we seeing that veterans are feeling during that transition? And what are some of the things that you're saying or providing to be able to help them through those?
One of the easiest stressors is financial. Financial stress comes in when you're getting ready to leave the service, and whether you're retiring or getting out. If it's a retirement, that retirement check's not nearly as big as you think it's going to be. But when you start thinking about what do you need to sustain living in the lifestyle you become accustomed to, so you need to look and see what the financial stress is associated, like how much money am I going to make? There's an esteem, an ego issue too, where you're coming from a leadership position or something like that. And it may not be a lateral transition into the civilian sector. You may have to take a step back to be able to move forward in the civilian side. And that induces stress. And there's family stressors associated. So we had at one of our Deloitte boot camps, we had one of the family support members who opened up that, her husband was a disabled veteran who was not able to work. So she was the primary breadwinner, and the stressors of having to deal with caring for her husband, caring for her children, and the ego issues of children saying like, why don't you have a job, mom? And things like that. Those are out there, and those, they really tug at your heart, but they're real. And we need to be able to identify resources, find jobs, find people that are willing to take a chance, and really help them navigate that process.
Any other thoughts from others? Miss Lang, it did look like you were about to say something a little earlier.
Oh, I was just going to add, there's the veterans piece, and then there's also that employers piece, which we touched on in an earlier discussion. But, the Department of Labor provides a myriad of resources to assist employers in connecting with veterans who are seeking employment, and other individuals, able individuals who are seeking employment. And so there's a number of those resources. On the VETS website, we have a employer guide to hiring veterans, and it addresses these type of resources. Of course, the American Job Center has a whole arm of the services that they provide that address all of those employer resources. They'll work with an employer to tweak the job description so that, as Kevin was talking about earlier, it really incorporates some of that military side of the terminology for certain jobs. And there, those are 24,000 different centers. Margarita talked about those. They're nationwide. They're easily accessible online. And, we're really excited to get the employers involved. So, Juan, hearing about what Deloitte does is very exciting. And we hear the same thing from our Higher Vets Medallion awardees. I mean, those kind of things are very exciting to hear, is that, employers are recognizing the value, and then veterans are also understanding that there might be stress, in the interim, and leveraging things that will help them with that stress, but then understanding that there's a light at the end of that tunnel. And that's really what all these programs, we hope, are bringing to the veteran and connecting them with the employers. Thank you.
Hey, Pam, great to hear. The only other piece I might add is the increasing advent of military bridge fellowships has been really fruitful for Deloitte. I think historically, each of the services has had their version of a tour with industry, right? Swap information. But as Pam and Kevin know, typically you accept one of those fellowships, you incur an additional obligation. So it's not like you're going to transition right into that role upon leaving. You probably bought yourself 3 more years in uniform by doing a year. But now with programs like SkillBridge, which each of the services are participating in, they'll take your last 6 months in uniform and allow you to spend that with Deloitte, for example. So anyone who's out there still serving, I urge you to Google or get smart on SkillBridge. We've had a number of great hires from folks who they spent 6 months with us. They're out of uniform. They look like a Deloitter. They get to see if it's a culture fit. We get to see if it's the right fit. The benefit for the company is this person could not be more current, right? They're still on active duty, right? With their Rolodex and their awareness of ongoing operations. Kevin's been a leader in facilitating these fellowship arrangements, but it's a great program that took a while to navigate through some congressional requirements, but it's in full bloom going now. So I urge you to check out SkillBridge if you're still serving.
And employers really love it. As Juan said, you're still being paid on active duty, and you're getting a full-time realistic job preview. You're doing the job and you're learning all the ins and outs. And that's one of the things we encourage when you do interview for a job or take a job. Explore it, and this is an opportunity for you to see if this is really a good fit for you. Just because somebody said that you should do this or something like that, it's your decision. And sometimes complacency gets in there, and you get, well, it's a job, it's paying the bills and everything. One of the things that we talk about is the underemployment aspect, and we keep talking about there's so much more that you could be doing. Don't just accept a job because you feel like they took a chance on you and you're miserable, you're not liking what you're doing, but you feel obligated to stay in that job.
Exactly. And if I could just add a little bit on that DoD SkillBridge, which is an outstanding program. We also talk about that in our curriculum, in our transition curriculum. But sometimes it's hard to get buy-in from the DoD commanders, because they have to allow those individuals to leave their position and, for up to 6 months. But we're working on that piece of it to get them to understand the benefit that it provides to their transitioning service members, their military members, the opportunity that it provides. And on the back end, it results in less time on unemployment insurance, which the services have to provide, so, it's getting that, us to all agree that, there's some benefit to everybody in that process. The other thing that we talk about in our curriculum is our apprenticeship programs, which are also a test ground for an individual, right? Because it's the opportunity to earn a wage while you're learning a program. Most of our actually all of the registered apprenticeship programs have a mentorship component tied to them, along with usually a credential attainment along with it. So that gives that veteran the opportunity to earn wages while they're learning a job and testing out an employer, but also testing out something they might want to do, right? Instead of, making that big leap from theory to, oh, I'm not sure whether I'm going to like this new job. It's just a great opportunity. So thank you both for bringing that up.
So that's a really good point, Pam. And I do want to ask this group a little bit more on when we're talking about mentorship, right? It's come up a few times today. But if we're also looking at allyship, if we're also looking at sponsorship, right? What does that mean in terms of what people listening today that maybe themselves don't identify as veterans, but they want to know how to support through those different lenses? How can they start to take action on these things?
I'll get the ball rolling. So Deloitte has a range of DEI communities and circles of interest and business readiness groups. We've called them at different times. The interesting thing about the vets one is that, of course, it cuts across every one of those, right? There's folks who fit into every one of those other groups. So there's this uniquely, I think, this kind of built-in relationship where, hey, your mentor, I think it'd be very helpful to have a vet mentor, but you're just as likely to, depending on the individual, find your mentor in navigating your new company or firm in the African-American group, in a disabled group, in, you name it. So the more and quicker you build out your network, the better. I think vets tend to have the inside lane or the shortcut, if you will, because we're like dogs sniffing each other out. We find each other, right? Whether it's the short haircut or I recognize your glasses. Those are Air Force issued glasses. We just find each other, right? But obviously, don't limit yourself to that, right? The broader the net you cast, the correlation between the size of your network and the success, I'm convinced is parallel.
And that is, if I could, just add to that a little bit, is, along with that mentorship is anybody can ask for an informational interview. Employers these days are looking for employees, right? And so they're trying to figure out how to make connections with people who are really interested in employment with their organization. And most of their LinkedIn pages, which employers are really upping their game on LinkedIn, it provides points of contact that you can just call and say, hey, I'm interested in this X type of position in your organization. Is there someone I could talk to about it and find out what they do on a daily basis, right? So that's some of that research. And we really try to provide those recommendations in our TAP curriculum, because they will bear out, both ways, either finding out, that, oh, this is not a job that I really am interested in doing, or, oh, I want to pursue this even more. Let me do more research on what type of companies do this kind of work. So, I mean, it's, sometimes finding out that you don't want to do that is just as valuable as finding out that you want to do something.
Fantastic. And one thing I'm curious about is, we've talked about transferable skills. We've talked about networking and how to go about this process, and the informational interview. But through all of those things that are happening and the veteran population, what are maybe some of the industries out there that you see them gravitating towards, where they say these transferable skills feel pretty comfortable in this type of an industry?
I can jump on that one. That's one that we see, one of the default ones is government service. Service members get out and there's a comfort factor in going into another government service, whether you're working for the DoD or the VA or another organization like that. So that's one of them. The other things they look at, I mean, we've been very successful in the IT industry, and I think that's something that is a huge industry, and it bridges a lot of different types of industries. So it's not just the logistics companies or whatever. You can get an IT job in almost any company. So whether they have skills, there's plenty of training programs out there that will get people certifications and get their foot in the door to maybe start a new career, start a new path. One of the things that we're looking at right now is different innovative ideas. We just launched this past year. We did 2 cohorts of drone pilot. We trained some veterans to be drone pilots, commercial drone pilots. There's a huge opportunity in the next couple of years for commercial drone pilots to support surveying, real like landscape. Like there's all kinds of opportunities. A railroad down here wanted to hire drone pilots to go check out the tracks so that they don't have to walk the tracks or things like that. So we're constantly on the lookout for things that look like cool, like a cool job to do. Like, hey, I'll get out there and play with this flying camera, and there's plenty of emerging opportunities out there. One of the things that we're seeing landscape wise, and I think Margarita pointed out, with the unemployment rate kind of pre-COVID being low, veterans unemployment was lower than that. It went up with COVID, came back down, and veterans unemployment has been lower than the civilian sector. But what we're seeing now is it's a different type of job that people are looking for. People are looking for those remote opportunities. Companies have recognized the value, and that, you know, people can be just as productive working not in a brick and mortar office than they are in the brick and mortar office. So there's a lot of jobs open out there. When you look at the reports and everything, the unemployment rate's low, but there's still a ton of jobs out there. You may have heard about the Great Resignation. There's a lot of people that are leaving their jobs and moving on to other opportunities. That's opening up backfill jobs that are really good jobs. And maybe it's somebody that just wasn't comfortable working in an office environment. They want that freedom to work from home. There's still plenty of jobs out there across all different industries. And when we get to a new normal, if there's a new normal, we'll just see what that looks like. But we're always on the lookout for what's going to be best for that transitioning service member.
And if I could just, oh, I'm sorry, Juan.
Oh, please go, Pam.
I was just going to throw out some statistics because you brought up, you know, a very good point, Kevin. Public sector is really where veterans are interested in being employed, including service-connected disabled. Just a statistics is 31% of employed veterans with a service-connected disability work in the public sector. So that's federal, state, county, it's all levels of public sector employment. And that's compared with 19% of veterans with no disability. And then the other thing that I wanted to point out is during our apprenticeship pilot program, you know, some of the opportunities that boiled up that veterans were interested in accepting in regard to apprenticeships were information technology. About 51% of our placements through that pilot were information technology. The other was agriculture and construction, with about 21% of our placements in that group, and then transportation, distribution, and logistics. And that was about 14% of our apprenticeship placements. So, I mean, in those 3 industries, we have all talked about throughout this panel discussion. So I thought it was really important to bring that up. It's funny how we've talked about those. And then of course, statistically, it bears those industries out. So thank you.
Hey, Ryan, if I could, I promise I'll make this really quick, but I think it's a really, really important question. Two key responses, I think. One is, I actually think this is kind of a golden age for vet hiring for the following 2 reasons. One is, you know, after the last year and a half, 2 years that the world has had, and the need to be comfortable in ambiguity, I think every transitioning vet should make this a centerpiece of their application. That is, you know, especially early on when no one knew what this was going to look like. And you all heard folks say, hey, this just feels weird. I haven't seen my manager in 2 weeks. I don't know what to do. Everybody's been in a uniform. You're used to checking in with the CEO and you'll see him again in 6 months, and you're off alone and unafraid. And that's called a Tuesday, right? And you need to stress that in your interview and your application. The second piece is this, and it goes a little deeper. I think that, I wonder if how many of our listeners have followed the headlines associated with If you don't remember the incident, if you don't remember the name, you remember the incident. They call it Operation Varsity Blues, right? The sting operation of very affluent folks purchasing admission to these elite schools for their kids. I think that was one of the death nails in the traditional college experience. I'll tell you what I mean by that. I think the traditional college experience and being willing to undertake a couple $100,000 worth of student debt in many cases, 4 or 5, sometimes some cases 6 years of your life, made sense when all this knowledge was confined to these ivory towers somewhere. But guess what? All these kids have access to this knowledge at their fingertips. It made some sense when there was a networking value to spending 4 years with other children, perhaps of affluent families, and those could be your business contacts for the rest of your life. Guess what? Those kids are all networked long before they go off to a campus. Now, I raise it to make this point. Few of us are ready to tell our kids not to go to college, but that day's out there on the horizon. And a lot of companies have got past it already. I've mentioned spending a couple of years at Amazon. You got the right coding certificate that works for them. They are much more interested in that than in an Ivy League sheepskin. That day is coming. And so for a vet who, the circumstances of their life may not now allow them to go out, take 4 years of full-time school and still pay the rent and make the mortgage and get kids to school and that kind of thing. It becomes incumbent upon you to convey the value of your training and your certifications and your MOS and your rate. And it should not having a traditional sheepskin diploma should not stop you from making the case to the value you can bring to a company or to a firm. It falls to the member, falls to the transitioning member to make that case. But I think it's a case that can be made.
Fantastic. Thank you for all of that background. So, okay, I think we have time for just a few more questions here. So, as we think about this and thinking about making our discussion actionable today of, across the spectrum of things that we've talked about, could you talk a little bit to, once the veteran actually, gets a job at this employer and comes into that organization, what's important for those teams that they're going to be supporting to know? Those direct reports maybe that are reporting to them, or the managers that are supporting them. What are the important things that they should know about that individual that's coming into their organization?
I can start with that. One of the things with our program that we really, I think, sets our program apart from other ones is the high touch aspect of it. And it's not just getting the job, it's sustaining the employment and retaining the job. So my team will check in with the warrior that we get placed at prescribed intervals of 30, 90, 180, 360 days. But that's just the minimum. They've established a relationship at that point, and they're checking to see how the onboarding process went, how the relationship's going. Is the job everything you thought it was going to be? And if not, we can start looking at other options out there. From an employer perspective, they can do the same thing. They want to welcome them on board with a robust onboarding process, not just, all right, here are the keys to the castle, go do your thing. They want to stay engaged. They want to let them know, like, hey, you're doing great, give them that positive reinforcement. If they're not, most military people have thick enough skin to be told, like, we want to be able to fix it if it's broken. So if I'm going the wrong direction, redirect me, get me back on track. So giving that feedback, positive, negative, doing what they can to keep them on track, and then starting to look for opportunities for growth. As I talked about at the beginning, like, when you're in the military, you're in a very structured career path, and you know what you need to do to succeed to get to that next level. And from an employer perspective, I think it's incumbent on them to help develop the talent that they have to get them to the next level. We've had some employers that say, like, we only expect you to work here for 3 years because you're going to be looking for something else at that point anyways. So having an employer that's like has enough emotional intelligence to understand, like, all right, we're not going to use them up and burn them out. We're going to develop them for the next opportunity out there. Those are great. And there's so many companies out there that want to do that. But as a veteran and a transitioning service member, you have a play in that too. We say our mission is to honor and empower, not to enable. So when we get some warriors come in and say, what jobs do you have for me? It's like, well, we're going to work together to find something. So you've got to get some skin in the game and work towards it too. don't just take that sense of entitlement. It's like, well, they're going to hire me because I'm this, that, and the other thing. You need to get on board and put the work in to get to that next level.
And that you used a perfect word there, empowerment, right? That's what we're trying to get veterans to understand. And then also employers, because they have to realize that empowering their employees, both veteran and non-veteran, is a benefit to their organization. You know, instead of having that 3-year track, it extends that track. And now with employers looking for employees, there are many more job openings than there are interested individuals. In a lot of cases, it's that opportunity to ensure that employers understand that. You know, that's one thing that is a benefit when you're, as an employer, when you're applying for a Higher Vets Medallion award. We do look at those mentoring programs when you bring veterans on. You know, what kind of programs do you have to ensure that they're, you know, that they're understand what their responsibilities are, but they're also connected with other veterans. It could be a mentorship program, in addition to other resiliency type of factors. But I thought you hit the nail on the head, Kevin. That's, you know, employers are really starting to realize that, oh, you know, we need to think about long-term employment again versus this, you know, short-term, I'm only going to have you for so long, because the benefit to the company is increased the longer they can hold on to that employee.
Hey, Ryan, the only piece I might add is that many of our vets check in and still have reserve requirements, reserve and or guard requirements. And understanding that, getting educated on what those obligations are, I think is a great way to be a supportive employer. I'm really proud that Deloitte is one of an increasing number of firms and companies across America that when a member is deployed or mobilized or activated and suddenly finds themselves going from a Deloitte manager to a Navy lieutenant for a year on, say, an individual augmentee for the desert for a year, with a pretty meaningful compensation drop, that Deloitte takes it upon itself to match that delta and make that person and that family whole. To me, that's real. That ain't bumper sticker patriotism. That's real. Put your money where your mouth is patriotism. And understanding the ongoing commitments of your vets is a great part of being a supportive employer.
Well, one quick addition to what Juan said, you know, with the demographic we serve and the disability issues, we understand that, you know, getting your VA appointments in there and the importance of taking care of yourself mentally, physically, and everything, and conveying that to warriors. When we work with employers, we want them to understand that, hey, this isn't they're just doing it because they want to get out of work and go see a doctor or something like that. This is part of their recovery. This is part of their new routine, their new normal. So the employers understand that and maybe be a little more flexible in scheduling. It's like, all right, I can adapt my hours to meet the appointments, because sometimes getting those VA appointments may be a little more challenging than just calling your medical provider and going in for a quick office visit.
Fantastic. All right. So one last question for everybody on our panel. If there's one thing that you want listeners to take away from today, what is that?
I guess my one thing is, particularly for veterans, it's that, you know, finding a job is a job. And you need to realize that. You need to put in the work for that. And that work includes, you know, identifying the opportunities, all the government programs that are out there. We have a lot of programs through the Department of Labor. Individual employers have a lot of different programs. And so just to keep that in mind, is it's not a short process. It is, in order for it to be valuable to you, you get what you put into it. It can take on average about 6 months to find a job. So it is a job to do that. Take your time, make it a good decision for you. Thank you.
I'll add in, the old adage that it's not how well you do, it's who you know. There's a little bit of truth to that, and a lot of that is networking. Most jobs, there's statistics out there on how many jobs you get via networking, but you're already part of a network as coming out of the services. You've also got a network of your community. You've got a network at your church. You've got a network from your alumni association. You've got networks that you're a part of that you may not even realize you're a part of. Signing up for programs like the Wounded Warrior Project, other VSOs out there, expand your network, talk to more people, get out there, put yourself out there. Don't wait for it to come to you. Get out there, be engaging in your network, and the jobs are out there. I know sometimes you can't see the forest through the trees, but there are tons of jobs out there, really good jobs that you're going to enjoy doing. You're going to thrive. We always say we don't want the best days of our lives to be behind us. They're ahead of you, and you've got a bright future to look forward to.
It's been great being on this panel with my shipmates, Kevin and Pam. And I would just add, a recurring mantra growing up in my house from my A7 pilot, late old man, was sweat in peace so you don't bleed in war. Usually to get us to cut the grass or something like that, but he took it from his flying days. And I think it's relevant for transitioning vets as well. There will always be someone who's more connected, whose family is more dialed in, who's got more resources, who went to a better school. The one piece you unequivocally can control is your preparation, right? Do you know everything about this firm? You know everything about this opportunity? Have you gone a step further? Are you bringing something to them that they may not have thought of yet? That's the piece you have. So as you hang up that uniform or that flight suit and make that transition, that phrase, sweat in peace, you don't bleed in war, may have had a literal meaning. I still think it has a significant meaning. Can be really a critical part of your transition, the next step on your journey.
Fantastic. Well, at this point, I wanted to say thank you to all of our panelists, Pam, Kevin, Juan, for sharing all of those great insights. They were fantastic and really appreciated that perspective today. So thank you for your time and the insights.
Thank you,
Thank
Ryan.
you.
Thanks for putting this together.
Great job, Ryan.
So Matt, over to you.
All right, thank you to all our panelists for sharing your insights. We will now move into the final portion of today's call, which consists of the stories of veterans who have themselves transitioned. Nick Hall, a principal in Deloitte's Government and Public Services practice, and Jess Rudd, a consultant, will speak. Each will share their personal story, including advice for those who have or plan to transition and how peers and colleagues can support. With that, I would like to hand it over to Miss Nick Hall. Please go ahead.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me here today. So thanks for the intro, Matt. As it was mentioned, my name is Nick Hall. I am a principal here in our government public sector. I lead our customer strategy work within federal health. And I always say this is my second career. Before I was here, I was in the Army. I was in the military police corps. And I always say I was a paratrooper and a jump master, and that is to my core who I still am today, even though I am, if you will, behind a computer. I joined the Army before 9/11. So I joined the Army of January of 2000, and I very quickly became a Bragg baby. I went straight to Fort Bragg, and I actually went to Bragg without any wings on, and that's a whole another discussion, but went to Fort Bragg in March of 2000, deployed very quickly to Kosovo, and it was while in Kosovo that the attacks of 9/11 happened. So very quickly redeployed and sent to Afghanistan, and was the first female involved in direct combat in Afghanistan, and had a really unique and great opportunity to serve our country with special forces and the infantry, and being embedded in an all-male unit really taught me a lot around resiliency, perseverance, and pushing through boundaries. So after I left the military, I completed my enlistment. I went back to college and then came to Deloitte as a consultant, and just got admitted into our partnership. So it's definitely been a journey of two careers. The reason why I came to Deloitte is that I saw this was the place for me to carry on the mission. And my work is now focused on our warriors, our veterans, survivors, caregivers, and beneficiaries within our military health system and within the veterans health system. So really excited to be here. Cheers.
Jess, we'd love to hear your background as well.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here today. This is really neat. I've seen a lot of familiar faces. My name is Jessica Rudd, and I am a Caucasian female with red hair and a beige sweater. Again, my story is a little untraditional. My trajectory was really laid out before me, graduating high school, going to college, going to be a first generation college student, and everything was great. But I got bored and decided I needed to change things up a bit. So at that time, I decided, well, I'm going to join the military. I left my college in good standing. So there was, nothing wrong there, just didn't want to do that anymore. So I was thinking and I said, well, if I'm going to join the military, I'm going to join the best branch. No, I'm just kidding. I'm going to join a challenging opportunity. And to me, the Marine Corps was like the shiny star that I was chasing. I went to the MEPS Center, which is the screening facility when you're joining the military. And I was the only female going to the Marine Corps. So at that point, I really knew this is what I wanted to do. I was different. And, that's kind of my backstory of why I joined the Marine Corps. But I've been out of the military for about 12 years now. So I'm sort of a little more seasoned and acclimated until the civilian sector. But I've come to Deloitte during the pandemic, and I have really felt a sense of camaraderie connecting with veterans again. So I'm really happy how my two lives have kind of connected here again at the firm.
Fantastic. Thank you both, Nick and Jess, for sharing your background. I can't wait to dive in a little bit more. So I do have some questions for you both that I'd love to ask. So, first, Nick, I want to ask, what were your biggest misconceptions when searching for a job? And then what might be a piece of advice that you learned from your transition that you think would be something that you'd like to share with others?
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. So similar to Jessica, I got out of the Army, over a decade ago, and I grew up in the Army with the be all you can be, right? That was the generation which I joined the Army. And when I was looking to transition, literally the commercials that were out at the time were, when you walk into the interview room, try not to laugh when they ask you about your leadership experience. And so I walked into my interviews with that kind of perspective. And lots of things have changed since then. And we have fantastic transition programs and panels like this. But I really walked into a couple of my first interviews and made some mistakes because I thought that automatically that they would understand how my leadership capabilities would automatically translate into their business, right? How could they not know? I was a platoon sergeant. I led men and women in combat. I was responsible for millions of dollars of equipment. I used to push people out of airplanes. Like, how do they not know how this leadership and what, how strong my leadership skills were? It's the very thing that had made me so successful in the military. But I had to really step back and think through, how do I translate this into their organization? How do I use this moment to be an education piece as well? And I got some really good mentorship from actually, transitioning vets that transitioned, whether it's 6 months before me or a year before me, tapping back into that network and asking, like, how do I do this? How do I translate that I was a jump master, right? To a manager sitting across the desk for me. And it was breaking it down and putting it into kind of corporate business terms and showing kind of the impact and the ROI of that. I'm resilient. I'm able to manage ambiguity. I can very quickly pivot on my feet and figure out what the next path is. My problem solving skills is far superior than others that have not had the same type of experiences and exposures that I have. So that was the way I was able to translate it. The second thing, really quickly, a big misconception. I was in the military police corps. I was a MP. So everybody's like, why did you get into law enforcement? And I, quite honestly, I thought about that. But what I wanted to do was something a little different. And what I see with vets that come into kind of our firm, and they think they have to be pigeonholed or siloed into DOD or some military affiliated work, when really, keep your options open, right? The number of vets that I talk to, I'm like, what do you want to do? They're like, well, I think it'll be easy if I just go back to DOD, but what do you really want to do? And they're like, I actually want to do product out in Silicon Valley. Well, let's go do product in Silicon Valley, right? And so I don't want us to stop kind of our goals or ambition because of our background and where it may seem really easy for us. I went back into military health or back into the military in healthcare because that's where my passion and where I wanted to be. But I was an MP. I wasn't in healthcare. The other piece of advice, very quickly to your last part, Ryan, there is, I think for me, and it took me a number of years while at Deloitte where I let go of this, is give yourself permission to make mistakes and fail and to learn, right? Coming out as a platoon sergeant, as a squad leader, being so responsible for people's lives, like, and we all hear responsible for lives, right? So I never had that permission to fail in the military. And here in a new corporate world where I'm learning new skills, meeting new people, I had to give myself that permission to not always get it right, to fail, to ask lots of questions. And it made me just a better consultant.
Fantastic. Thanks for that perspective, Nick. And Jess, I want to ask a question of you too. And my question is, we talked a lot about resources today, right? We heard it from our keynote speaker. We heard it during the panel. So when you were on your job search, what military or civilian resources did you use throughout that process?
Yeah, Ryan. So that's a great question. And this is going to be sort of a transition away from, first, I am a veteran, but I'm also a military spouse. So my husband and I, we were actually dual active. So we were both service members married to each other while we served. So I had the unique, like maybe multiple resources to kind of tap into the military spouse resources as well. And one resource that I used was the Military Spouse Employment Partnership. And it was such a unique platform because they hosted virtual career fairs. So it was sort of like this one-stop shop where you could get on, you'd go booth to booth, vendor to vendor, to see all of these employers that were there ready to hire and chat with military spouses. So that was a really neat resource that I used. And then I chatted with recruiters live. And it's sort of a like a full circle moment because I was going booth to booth, and Deloitte has a booth with MSEP, the Military Spouse Employment Partnership. So, years later, here I am, and I'm plugged into the Military Spouse Initiative here at Deloitte. And I also handle the virtual career fair nows for the Deloitte booth. So it's sort of a full circle moment to use this resource as an end user, something that was unique because I'm also a spouse. And then now, sharing the resources and kind of bringing military spouse talent to the firm.
Fantastic. Thanks, Jess, for sharing that background. Just incredible stories from you both. I do have one more question that I want to ask each of you. And that question is, what is maybe one skill or a few skills that you underestimated during your military career that's become one of the most useful skills you found post-military? So Nick, I'll start with you.
Yeah, cheers, Ryan. So I've already touched on this, a couple of things, always a couple of things. The first is around versatility and resiliency. Because, for us in the military, it's second nature. Things will go awry. The timelines will change. The situation will change. We'll lose time, we'll gain time. People are available, they're not available. Like all of these, the madness that's like everyday job and kind of an everyday thing for us in the military. isn't an everyday thing for a lot of people, like non-vets that are joining, especially in our world in consulting. And in consulting, not at the same degree, but those things happen. Clients' expectations change, timelines get moved up, clients want different things. How do you respond to that? And I found that I drew on my military experience, be able to problem solve on the fly, be able to reframe, rebuild opportunities and solutions, because I was used to thinking on my feet. I was used to being able to be very versatile and resilient, right? I was used to taking the punches and coming back. And I think that was one of the biggest strengths for me. The second is, and I always say this, in the military, number one, we always take care of our people. We grow inclusive and diverse teams. And for me, that has been such a game changer within the corporate world. Like, I understand the different things that motivate different people. I understand kind of like, how do we bring teams together from very different backgrounds, right? And how do we work together around a common mission, a common goal? In the military, that was life or death. We had to do that. And being able to bring that skill to consulting and to kind of corporate America is such an add-on. The last thing I'll mention is this thing of sponsorship. And so when you come to, if you come to corporate America, when you come into corporate, there is this idea around sponsorship, and it's a new term for some people. But what sponsorship means is really, how do I take care of my people when they're not in the room? How do I take care of my people? Be able to raise my people, be able to get my people the promotions or the accolades they need when they're not in the room. And in the military sponsorship, we do that all the time. I took care of my team, my squad, my team all the time. But these are things that are very innate to us as veterans that are value add to corporate. So that's why I'll finish with that, is the things that are innate to you are so valuable to the world that you're about to jump into.
Fantastic. Thanks, Nick. Jess?
Yeah, thank you. And I don't know how to follow that up, but I'll go ahead and kind of add a little bit of color to, something that I think I underestimated in my military career was cultivating relationships. And I know that sounds a little contradictory because you think of the military as this giant organization that is just this huge brother and sisterhood and all this camaraderie. But when you come into, the corporate world, it's a little bit different, but you still have to find ways to cultivate relationships. So I think when you spend hours and hours with these people, you literally sleep with them, you deploy with them, that is your family. So I think military members are naturally seeking, that bond still. So one thing that I kind of by default have used daily is just cultivating those relationships. I didn't really realize, that superpower, but trying to build like meaningful relationships, especially in the work that we do, I'm in consulting, has really been like a superpower that I didn't know I would use post-military.
Fantastic. Well, thank you both. Nick, Jess, I have one word, and that's inspired based upon your stories. So thank you both for sharing and taking the time to be here today. So with that, Matt, I'd like to pass it over to you to close us out.
Thank you very much. All right, that concludes today's call. We would like to thank everyone for joining us today for this discussion on supporting transitioning veterans. We look forward to continuing to engage in the future on this important topic. Thank you.